We're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman Nimchet, discussing the halachot of Kriyat Shema and of Sadi Aleph Amud Bet of the regular prints of Mishna Berurah. And Maran writes, Im lo kra'ah, this is Seif Zayin, the last Seif, the concluding Seif of Shulchan Aruch over here in Siman Nunchet. Im lo kra'ah bayom, yesh omrim sheyesh la tashlumin ba'arvit, vechen im lo kra'ah kriyat shema ba'arvit yesh la tashlumin bayom, veyesh cholkin. The Mechaber Shulchan Aruch brings over here that there is a machloket poskim, and this is already machloket in the later Rishonim. The Bet Yosef brings the Kolbo and Rabbeinu Chaim that discuss this. That those who say if you missed the Kriyat Shema of Shacharit, as we discussed yesterday, the details of the halachot, then you could maybe make it up, just like by Tfilah, you miss Shacharit, you could make it up by Arvit if it was be'ones, if it was not a deliberate miss, you could make it up later on by Mincha. Here also by Shacharit, it would be Tashlumin, that if you missed Shema of Shacharit, you could make it up, say twice, the Kriyat Shema of Arvit, and vice versa. And then there are others who disagree with this, the Yesh Cholkim. So before we even see the Mefarshim, we have discussed this before, that Maran Shulchan Aruch has used very many klalim of how he has authored his work of Shulchan Aruch. And normally speaking, when we have stam v'yesh halacha ki stam, when we have yesh v'yesh halacha ki yesh batra, when Maran brings yesh omrim like this, v'yesh omrim like that, usually the halacha is like the second opinion that he brings in Shulchan Aruch, in which case here would mean that you cannot make up for a missed Shema. You have to be careful not to miss, because if you do, then you cannot make it up. The Mishna Berurah rather writes in Sif Katan Chavchet, Sheyesh la tashlumin, ela kavana sheyetzeh b'zeh kriyat Shema. It doesn't mean that you're going to make it up exactly, and now you're going to be yotze the Yedei Chovah of kriyat Shema of the morning. No. Machash kvar avar zmanah. Already the time has passed. It's like reading the Torah. It just means that you must say it lechatchila again twice at night. Not that the second time actually is fulfillment of saying Shema in the morning. No, you missed that, and you missed it completely. But at least you're doing some makeup, which would obligate you lechatchila to read it twice, to make up the number of Shmas that you should have said and you didn't. Therefore, you would say the Chovah of the first one, what's current first. In other words, if you're standing at night, you would say Arvit first, and then you would say another one after Arvit to make up for the Shacharit that you missed. The Tech Bachar Ma'ariv, right after we finish Arvit, Yikra ot Shema b'shvil zeh, you read another time of Kriyat Shema because of this that you missed. Hapam shechiser, im b'shogeg chisera. That's only if you missed it b'shogeg or be'ones. You unintentionally missed it, or you were forced, you were in the case that you couldn't. Kemoshe nitbayer lekaman, Siman Kufchet, we're going to have that in the halachot of Tfilat Tashlumin in Siman Kufchet. V'yesh cholkin. So what do we paskin? Says the Mishna Berurah, Hagrava Birkei Yosef Yichru Keda'azu. Both Maran Chida and the Vilna Gaon paskin like this. Shita, as we mentioned before, even without knowing that, we already know that Maran has paskin like that. The only reason that the Mishna Berurah brings it, because in the mind of the Chafetz Chaim, these kelalim of yesh v'yesh, halacha ki yesh batra, stam v'yesh, Chafetz Chaim does not deal with them generally. This is good to know. Generally speaking, he does not deal with them the same way that we deal with them as a clear psak halacha. He still deals with the Gedolei Achronim to try to see where the swing of the Achronim was and the weight that it carries. And again, in the mindset of Mishna Berurah, for instance, the Vilna Gaon carries a tremendous weight. Hafetz Chaim, even if you would have a number of Gedolei Achronim on one side and the Milah Gaon on the other side, many times he goes with the Milah Gaon against a number of Gedolei Achronim just because of the weight and the chashivut that he puts on the Milah Gaon. And again, when it comes to Klalei Maran, he does not necessarily deal with it as a clear hachra'ah in halakha. Even though that he's aware of the klalim, but he deals with it more as something as a help on the side. And this again gets into a much larger discussion, because you do see the klalei halakha of Maran Shulchan Aruch inconsistent in many places, and that opens doors to many discussions. For instance, when it comes to Choshen Mishpat, is one way that we mentioned before that Kaf HaChaim categorically disagrees with Chacham Ovadia in Klalei Maran. On one hand, Maran in Ovadia holds a Maran when he brings Stam V'yesh or Yesh V'yesh, the one that he doesn't paskin like, he at all does not give any credence in halacha to, it's just bringing it to give kavod to that shita, but halachically he's not reckoning with it at all. Kaf HaChaim says exactly the opposite. He says no, Maran is bringing it to reckon with it, and therefore, if the shita that Maran does not paskin like is more mahmir, so imagine stam v'yesh, halacha ki stam. If the yesh is more mahmir than stam, Maran is telling you, I want you to be mahmir like that shita, but b'shat hadachak you don't have to. The ikar adin is like stam. But if I'm bringing it, I'm telling you, I want you to be mahmir like that. And if the yesh is more mekel, then Maran means that b'shat hadachak you have what to rely on, the shita of yeshomrim. That's how Kaf HaChaim says it. Chacham Ovadia, again, as we mentioned before, categorically disagrees with that, and he holds that this carries no weight in halacha. Maran is just bringing it to show you that this is an important shita, to give kavod to the baalei shita, but not to put any halachic weight on it. So again, that's the background to why Mishna Berurah does this. But nevertheless, in this case, he brings that the Gra and the Birkei Yosef, both Maran Chida, both paskin like the Yeshomrim Batra over here, that you cannot make it up in any case. We're starting next Siman Nun Tet. This is the first bracha in the morning when you say Yotzer Or, and Maran writes in Seif Aleph, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, Yotzer Or Uvorech Hoshech, Tikenu La'askir Midat Laila B'yom. Why do we say Yotzer Or and Borech Hoshech? This is already the Gemarot that we've had in Masechet Brachot, that even though that it is morning, the institution of Chazal was that both at night and in the morning, you mention both night and morning. So therefore, the bracha that you say in the morning is not just Yotzer Or, but you also say Borech Hoshech. And at night also, say Ma'avir Yom U'Mavi Laila, U'Mavdil Ben Yom U'Ben Laila. You say both the midot in both tefillot of Arvit and Shacharit. Tikenu la'askir midat Laila beyom, that we mention the midah of Laila during the bracha of the day as well. Lehotzi milev ha'afikorsim she'omrim shemiv shebara or lo bara hoshech. And this was instituted in order to address the bogus claim of those who wanted to say that there are different powers in the galaxy, and the one that created the light did not create the night, and therefore we mentioned both of them at both times. Says the Mishna Berurah, Sarich la'afsik ben yotzer uben or. You say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, Yotzer Or. Ki hechi delo nishtama Yotzer Or. See, because Aleph is not pronounced well, and the Ot, the letter that's right before it, is silent, right? It's Yotzer. It doesn't have any ta'amim, so to speak. So therefore, it could be very much, if you say it quickly, it could sound like one word, Yotzeror, which is not a word, right? This happens to be if the first word is the same as last, or it's a silent letter like Aleph that doesn't have its own pronunciation. So here it will be Yotzeror, Or let's say hamotzi lechem min. If you say it fast without a pause, it would be heard lechamin, which would be one word because the mem and the mem, they're both silent, that is the same identical letter. So it would become, it would sound like one word, which would again destroy the meaning of the two words and hence the bracha. Ve'ayin be'er hetev, he says, look at be'er hetev and sharet tshuva. There's other details that they discuss over there as well. Now, the reason that we say bracha on the light of sun every day, but we don't say on the light of a ner, we only say it on Motzei Shabbat for fire, for light that we use, we create, so to speak. The Kaf HaChaim says because the Or HaShemesh is mitchadesh bechol yom. So every day is a new Hashamayim ha'chadashim v'haaretz ha'chadasha asher ani oseh. It's a new creation. Therefore, it needs a new bracha. I would say perhaps it's because the takana that Chazal gave, just like every takana that we have in the morning, you say brachot, that you benefit from the world as it is every day. This is also the takana that you say thanks on the creation of something that gives us life. If it wasn't because of the heat and the light of Shemesh, we would freeze to death in less than 2-3 days. And therefore, that's thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Once it's Shacharit, you thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the light. Mashenken, the creation of fire, we don't thank for that. We thank Hashem on Motzei Shabbat because fire was found, so to speak, by Adam HaRishon on Motzei Shabbat, and that's why we thank Hashem on Moreh Hayesh on Motzei Shabbat. It's a thing specific to Motzei Shabbat. That's why it becomes a whole question on Yom Kippur, even though that is called Shabbat, so to speak, but the light that you use on Motzei Yom Kippur cannot be a fresh fire. It has to be a fire that was Shavat, that existed before Yom Kippurim, and he lived through it without being tampered. And then you could, so to speak, acknowledge the fact that now was Asur for me, now it became Mutar for me. Because it's now Motzei Shabbat. Motzei Shabbat, you could fresh fire because that's celebrating, so to speak, the creation, the founding of fire in the natures. That's why we say it on Motzei Shabbatot. So it's a little bit different, categorically different. So it says the Imam Loez, actually, he says that just like you have to be careful in what we just mentioned here, you also have to be careful not to swallow letters and words when you pronounce something. You have to say every teva, every word and every letter should be pronounced well. And the Kaf HaChaim writes that this is so important because, for instance, if you have vecharaf, if you don't mention it properly, it becomes vecharaf, which means disgrace. Right? It completely changes the meaning and so on. So again, it's important that a person should separate the words. The Gemara says a person that pronounces Kriyat Shema properly, mesanini lo et hageinam. It will cool down. There's a tremendous schar that's mentioned for a person like that pronounces everything properly. And again, as we have mentioned many times, the pronunciations that change the meaning would invalidate the tefillah and would invalidate the shaliach tzibur from being a Baal Koreh. Sometimes it could be as simple as where you put the stress in the word. For instance, we recently had V'Rachel bito ba'a imatzon. When the shepherds are speaking with Yaakov Avinu, say, yeah, Rachel is going to be coming in future, ba'a, right? Which means future tense. because the stress is on the second syllable, right? But later on, in that same parasha, a few psukim later, when Rachel already came, it says, Rachel ba'a imson lavan avia, right? She already came. So if you don't, it's the same word, but the stress you put on different syllables, and that makes all the difference, right? And this is, when nitmetem versus when nitamtem, it's very different. It's the same writing, different reading. It could be as simple as even ritzpa and ritzfa. Ritzpa means a hot coal. Ritzfa means the floor. See how different it is. Well, in Megillat Esther we have this, right? Al risafat bahat v'shesh v'dar v'soharet. Right? There is with a fei. If you say rispa, then it means a hot coal. It changes the meaning, of course, right? Or there, hashtiya kadat en ones. Many people, especially those who've learned in the Ashkenazi yeshivot, that they say things more mileel than milera. They will say an ones. Ones is a noun, right? It means there was no force. Ones is a fellow, a person whose job is to go and enforce something. So you see how different it is. One little thing could change the meaning of the word, the meaning of the sentence. So that's, again, a parenthesis that a person should be careful. And Mishna Berurah continues. Oh, that's basically the end of the Seif Aleph. Seif Bet Maran writes, Imagine at night, you just following your thing that you said at night. Instead of saying Yotzer Or Uboreh Hoshech in the morning, you said the bracha of night, right? You said Baruch Hu Hashem HaMevorach, Baruch Hashem Baruch Olam Va'ed, and you start saying Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, and by mistake, instead of saying Yotzer Or, you started the bracha of Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, which is the bracha of Kriyat Shema at night. What do you do? When Iskar Miyad, if you remember right away, where Amar Yotzer Or, and you switched, you said Yotzer Or Uboreh Hoshech, and you ended also Yotzer HaMeorot, you're good. Yatsa, you're good to go. Avalim Amar Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim. But if you said in the beginning of the bracha, Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, Velo Amar Yotzer Or, you didn't say anything about Yotzer Or of Midat Hayom, Velo Siyem. Sorry, or Lo Siyem Yotzer HaMeorot, or that you did say Yotzer Or, but you didn't end saying Yotzer HaMeorot, you ended with Ha'ma'ariv Aravim, right? So you didn't have the beginning and the end of the bracha properly, Lo Yatsa. Then you're not Yotzer. Ve'im Amar Yotzer Or Uboreh Hoshech. And if you said in the beginning, Yotzer Or Uboreh Hoshech, you said it properly, and then you added Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim. So you mixed both of the nuschaot. You started right, Yotzer Or Uboreh Hoshech, but you put everything of the Arvit also in the Cholent, right? Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, and you went on and you ended V'gam Siev Ma'ariv Aravim. You ended also Baruch Atah Hashem Ma'ariv Aravim. So you had a proper beginning, but you didn't have a proper ending. If you had proper beginning and not proper ending, or proper ending and not proper beginning, Lo Yatsa, you're not Yotzer. You have to have Yotzer Or Uboreh Hoshech in the beginning, and you have to have Yotzer HaMeorot as the bracha ending in order to be Yotzer. And the Ramah adds, V'hu Hadin, Im Lo Amar Tchila Rak Yotzer Or. Same would be if you said in the beginning only Yotzer Or, you only said the right thing, you didn't mix up anything of Arvit with it. If you end Ma'ariv Aravim, Lo Yatsa. If you just messed up on the ending, Lo Yatsa, which again, based on the klal that we just gave, that would make sense because you started it properly, but you didn't end it properly. In order to be Yotze, you need to have proper start and proper ending, even if you messed up a little bit in the beginning and you added the Ma'ariv Aravim, Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, still fine because you said Yotzer Or Uboreh Hoshech, and you also said Yotzer HaMeorot. Avalim Siyem Yotzer HaMeorot, Kevan Shpatach Yotzer Or, but if you ended up Yotzer HaMeorot, Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMeorot. Kevan shepatach Yotzer Or, because you also started it correctly, you said Yotzer Or Baruch Hoshech, even though that you messed up afterwards, and you said Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, you have still a good beginning, you have a good ending, you're good to go. Even though that in the middle, you mentioned a whole lot of Arvit things, or the whole thing of Arvit. Once the beginning of the bracha was fit and the end of the bracha was fit, you're good to go. Says the Mishna Berurah, Miyad, Davka Miyad Haynu B'toch Kedei Dibur. Miyad means you literally right away fixed it. That your bracha of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam went also on Yotzer Or U'Boreh Hoshech. But if you took more than Kedei Dibur of pause, then it's a problem. Says the Mishna Berurah, Telo Kaya Bracha Shpatach Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Al Ma Shechazar V'Amar Yotzer Or. If you paused more, then the bracha is not going on Yotzer Or, because he didn't say it right away. Same would be if you said it, but you didn't say it immediately afterwards. That's the shita of the Pri Megadim in the name of Bach. There is somewhat of a machloket over here from the Rabbi Yaakov Milisa, the Netivot, the Chavodat, his Sidur Derech HaChaim, he disagrees with this. He says, even if you didn't remember until towards the end of the bracha, in other words, he said, that's already much more than Toch Kedei Dibur, after Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. Right? Toch Kedei Dibur is the time it takes to say Shalom Alecha Rabbi Umori, or Shalom Alecha Rabbi. Right? Well, how much is that? A second and a half. Right? It's few words. Right? Shalom Alecha Rabbi Umori even would be 4 words. So you say Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, the Chochmah. You said already much more than that. So even if you said it fast, but you said towards the end of the bracha already, says the Derech HaChaim, because you were now pausing, you were saying Shevach of Hashem, which is Midat Laila. Fine, as long as you add up to that right away without a pause, you add Midat Hayom, you say, oh, Yotzer Or Baruch Hashem. You add that, so even though that you messed up the order, you didn't start with Or, you started with Midat Laila, says the Derech HaChaim, that's still fine. דרך החיים פוסק אפילו אם לא נזכר עד קרוב לסוף הברכה, מכל מקום, כיוון שלא גמר אותה, אין צריך להתחיל מראש ברכת יוצר אור, רק יאמר יוצר אור ובורא חושך, and then you continue from there, and you say the ברכה of יוצר המאורות at the end, and that's sufficient. וכן יש לנהוג למעשה כמו שכתב רבי ברורה, and that's the psak of Mishna Berurah. He sides with דרך החיים, with the Netivot, on this matter. ולא אמר, so פירוש אף על פי שסיים ברוך אתה השם יוצר המאורות, even if you ended up properly by יוצר המאורות, because the תחילה of the bracha you messed up, you didn't say the proper יוצר ובורא חושך, you're not יוצא, and you have to go back to the beginning of ברוך אתה השם אלוקינו מלך העולם, and come from there in order. And the next piece also, he says the same thing, basically, that you need the chatima and the tchila of the bracha to be proper. Rak yotzer or, perush, v'chol nusach shel bracha, levat shta b'chatima. Same would be if you said the entire nusach properly, you start from yotzer or, I'm reading the Sif Katan Hey in Mishna Berurah, that you said the entire thing properly, yotzer or, everything, you said properly until the very end, and you messed up at the end. The Chatima, you said, Ma'ariv Aravim. Afal piken lo yatsa. The halo berach b'chatima al haor, because the bracha has a beginning, has an end. That's why we are so specific about the beginning and the end, because a bracha is compiled from a beginning and the end. It's a bracha arucha. So for it to be a bracha of Kriyat Shema, of morning, it has to start with morning's thing, and it has to end with morning's thing. So I don't give chashivut to the fact that you started and continued the whole thing right. If you at the very end you said Baruch Atah Hashem, you said instead of Orot you said Ma'ariv Aravim. Siyem Ma'ariv Aravim, ve'im toch kedei dibur nizkar, and the toch k'de dibur, Marai Nedarim says toch k'de dibur k'dibur dami. So you can say it right away. In other words, whatever you say toch k'de dibur within the second, it's considered that you said that to begin with. So if you said Baruch Atah Hashem, Hamari Varavim Yotzera Meorot, you right away fixed it within a second. That is considered that you said Yotzera Meorot, and we don't reckon with the fact that you said Hamari Varavim first, and you would be kasher. Lo yatzav im ta'av lo nizkar at she'itchil avar haba. If you didn't remember and you started already avat olam, you started the next bracha. Lo yafsik b'ntayim. Do not stop in the middle. Rak yisayem k'seder brikat avar haba. You should finish the bracha of avat olam and then say yotzer before kriyat shema. In other words, the order of the two brachot before shema is not ma'akiv. Hence, if you already started the bracha of avat olam or avar haba for Ashkenazim, finish the bracha of avar haba, avat olam, and then say yotzer oru v'orei hoshech, and continue yotzer meorot, and then say shema. So, on this inyan, Chacham Obadiah also writes that when you started avat olam and you mentioned the name of Hashem, then you should not stop, because you mentioned Hashem's name already in avat olam. Aftanu Hashem Elokeinu. You mentioned Hashem's name, right? But if you have not started, right? If you have not started the thing, you could go back and start from Yotzer or Hoshech, not to change the order of things. Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, he writes that even though that you started avat olam, so long as you have not finished avat olam, you should stop and go back, even though that you mentioned Hashem's name, right? You said avat olam aftanu Hashem Elokeinu. You said Baruch Atah Hashem. That's not considered Shem Shamayim Lebatala. Go back and start Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Yotzer Or Hoshech. So he says you go back. Obadiah says no. So if you mention Hashem's name already, you may as well finish. And Chafetz Chaim would tell you, doesn't make a difference. As long as you start Avad Olam Aftanu, even if you didn't say Hashem's name, just finish it up, because there's no specific order in the brachot, and you'll say both ways. So you started it, you finish it. Let's just finish this one piece. Yatsa. So finally, in Seif Katan Chet, Mishna Berurah says the klal, the rule of thumb, basically, that comes from this Seif, which is what we said already when we learned the Mechaber, the Maran together. Tamtzit ze ha-Seifu, the summary of this Seif Shulchan is the Shnei Dvarim yesh b'Birkat Yotzer or the Shacharit Deikuba. There are two things that are ma'akiv, very important. Without those two things, both of those two things, you're not Yotzer. One is the Pticha of the bracha, or the middle, right? It has to be properly mentioned Yotzer Or Hoshech. You have to say Midat Hayom and Midat Laila B'Yom. And the second thing is the end. The second is Chatimat HaBracha. V'dadu adin b'birkat Ma'ariv Haravim. The Arvit, same halacha is by Ma'ariv Haravim of Arvit. If at Arvit you started Yotzer Or Hoshech, you're not Yotzer. But if you fixed it, you started, Asher Dora Ma'ariv Haravim, B'Chochmah, B'Tech Sharim, B'Tmuna, and then you just veered off to Yotzer Or Hoshech, and you went the whole text you said of the morning, and then you ended up properly. You remembered, you ended up Baruch Atah Hashem, Ma'ariv Haravim, you're good to go. The same two things are important at night as they are during the day. V'dadu adin b'birkat Ma'ariv Haravim d'Arvit k'mevar b'brachot af Yud Bet Amud Aleph ve'ayin sham. And Bezrat Hashem will continue this in the days to come.